3 years ago, I posted this video on the DIYing of the installation of our backyard turf. So many DIY turf videos out there are made by actual professionals, so ours was a little different because we had zero landscaping experience. And around April of each year, the views on the videos start to go up and the messages start coming in from people emerging from winter trying to research how to install turf on their own. Thank you for all of the positive comments on my video. Some people even said it was the best video on the topic, and a lot of people have asked how the turf has held up over time. So let me show you around to see how it's doing after 3 years. One thing that I didn't really show in the last video is the prep work that went into preparing our backyard for the turf. Not only did we level the dirt out and keep a very slight grade in the dirt to allow water to run off, but we also installed this retaining wall, planter box area, and the bender board perimeter around the other side. For the retaining wall, we used builder grade wood from the big box hardware store, which I would totally not recommend because it's going to degrade quickly since it's just sitting against wet soil. But I was afraid to invest in better materials because I didn't know how well it was going to turn out against the turf, and I'm just an amateur. Now that I see how good it turned out though, I wish I had used better materials. I will say that after 3 years, it's still holding up just fine with some paint, but I know it's not going to last decades or anything like that. The bender board part of the edging has held up really great over time. It hasn't changed at all. It was super easy to install, and you put these stakes in to hold its shape. They haven't really moved, and no complaints about it. The remainder of our edging are these concrete pads that the prior owners of the house installed. So how's the turf itself? Well, simply put, it's as good as the day we first installed it. I have no complaints about it at all, but here are 4 lessons I learned that I wish I knew beforehand. First, we still get weeds. Despite putting the weed cloth down and the decomposed granite on top of that, the pesky clovers still grow out of the turf. I don't understand how they do that since they don't get any sun, but I guess that's the nature of weeds. So over the past 3 years, we've had to pick them out to maintain the look, but I will say it's gotten much better over time, and they barely grow anymore. At first, I was really nervous that I'd be picking them out forever, but the growth rate has slowed dramatically each year. If weeds are a concern for you and you know you get a lot of weeds, you could consider putting down some weed killer before installing the weed cloth. Of course, weed killer is quite controversial in terms of its health effects, and we graded our lawn to flow into the direction of our vegetable patch, so it's probably a good thing we didn't use weed killer just for that reason. Second, I like the turf so much, but I just don't like these little design details we put in. We put this small patch of rocks over there, and we did a little curvy edge over there, and our entire bender board installation is wavy, and I think it was all just a bit unnecessary. I think those curves are more suited for a suburban home where you're trying to integrate into the surrounding nature, but we're in San Francisco and have a more modern aesthetic, so I think just straight lines everywhere along all the sides would have been better. And I would just have extended the turf where all these rocks are. All of the plants around the perimeter we've sort of collected or been gifted over time, which has been great. But I think my preference would be to have more uniformity. I think if we wanted to do some more professional landscaping with a uniform set of plants every so often, we could consider redoing the edges at that time by making the planter beds just a little bit wider all along the edge, but that's really low on the priority list. Third, I don't think anyone ever notices, but I still see the seam of the turf when I look at it right here. Like I said in my last video, I would probably have considered the S-curve seam tool instead of a straight seam to make it blend in more. The S-curve tricks your eye so you can't see the seam. However, like I said, I don't think anyone else really cares about it, and most people probably don't even see it except for me. It actually doesn't even bother me a crazy amount, but I do see it every time I look at it. So if you're a perfectionist, maybe that's something to consider. I think part of the problem too is the turf glue we used is formulated to expand as it dries. So what we thought was a thin layer of glue actually bubbled up, and that contributed to the seam being a little bit more visible. Finally, this is just a warning, but the turf gets hot. Luckily, we're in San Francisco where it stays fairly cool year-round. Summer temperatures usually stay in the 70s, and yet this turf retains a lot of heat. For us, it's perfect because on warm days, the turf gets really nice and warm on your feet, but on the very few super hot days we get here, you can't walk around barefoot. So I can only imagine that in an even hotter climate, it would be unusable for a good part of the year as a play surface, particularly for kids. And while we used sand for our infill, I've seen the recycled black rubber pellets used as well for infill, and I can only imagine those get even hotter. The huge advantage of the turf, of course, is that it's essentially zero maintenance. No watering or fluffing is required to maintain its look except for just pulling out the weeds that I mentioned. I'm totally satisfied, and it looks and performs just like the day we installed it. We love hosting barbecues out here, and we just got this puppy. The turf is awesome for our dog because he's been going to the bathroom everywhere, and we just do a little hose spray to clean the turf as needed. There are turfs that are specifically branded for pets, which apparently have a different backing that allow for easier drainage. But I'll tell you, the turf we have is not specifically for pets, and I think it's perfectly fine for our dog. He's happy. So that's it. Thanks for checking out my video, and as always, I'm happy to answer any questions you might have about your installation. It's been great to connect with some of you about your installs, and I have to thank YouTube because in my last video I mentioned that the dimensions of our yard meant that we had to buy a lot more turf than we actually needed, and we were left with a lot of extra unused turf. Well, I was able to sell our offcuts to someone off the YouTube comments. So thanks for watching, good luck to you, and I promise you won't regret it.